AskReddit by Spinksy48. What is your never interrupt an enemy while they are making a mistake moment? In a meeting with my project manager who has not been in the office or worked a proper full day for months, she has increasingly been annoyed by people bypassing her to get things done by telling me and her other direct reports what to do. I was about to answer a question for stakeholders. She told me to let her speak one sentence and will let me have my bit. I did as I was told, and she told a stakeholder a completely wrong thing about the system we were handling and made a complete fool out of herself. She got sacked this month. Boy, do I love a happy ending. At my current job, part of my duties is to do trailer audits, make sure people are loading safely, and I was training a new member for the position to do the job. After a few weeks, it turns out that the other person wasn't doing any aspects of the job. Instead, they were just mingling like it was a cocktail party. When asked why they weren't doing anything, they say it was because they were never trained. Well, turns out that due to past complaints about this particular person, management put them on a PIP, that if they got any type of training they were to have a piece of paper documenting what kind of training it was, who trained them, and management sign off, with all party signatures. When they pulled the file that said they were indeed trained in all duties of the job, they just sat there silent and was fired. They were fired because they pulled the same stunt in every department of the building, and mine was their last chance. Sounds like they got paid for a couple months to dick around. Likely a win in their book. I let the lady who changed lanes into me run her mouth about how I rear-ended her before pulling the cop aside to show him my dash cam footage. A woman sideswiped my wife trying to pass on the right in front of the police station and kept going 1,000 feet or more down the street. The cop showed up and went to that woman first, and she lied about everything. Said the accident happened where she stopped. Said my wife made an illegal turn. All made up. When the cop came to talk to us, he wouldn't even listen to our side of the story. I told him what she said made no sense based on the damage to the car, and his response was, well, you see all kinds of things. I told him check your parking lot cameras and said there was no need to check them because the accident didn't happen in front of the police station, etc. I came so close to yelling at the cop. He tickets my wife, end of story. Later that night he calls my wife, says he decided to check the parking lot cameras after all and that my wife's version of the accident was the more truthful one. He took care of her ticket and tickets the other driver. Very frustrated about that. When a coworker who I hated got fired a few weeks after I decided to stop fixing his mistakes even if it impacted a client. On the one hand, you don't want to be a snitch, but on the other hand you really shouldn't cover up other people's stupidity. Had a coworker who should have been fired a year earlier, but I kept stepping in. On at least 2 occasions I told myself that I had to shield the job from liability when his personal and professional incompetence got people physically hurt. So I stepped in and smoothed things out, instead of letting him dig his own grave. When he eventually got fired, it took him 6 months to forget my phone number. Don't cover for stupid, kids. As a CPS worker at the time, speaking to a father with police present in a case concerning substance use, and the father admitting being high on meth, and thinking the cops were there to arrest his daughter for stealing his meth, admits to me that she stole it because he let her have some, because if I didn't give it to her she'd go be a prostitute to get it. Just an entire 45-minute conversation with a guy having no apparent awareness that he had just told a CPS worker and to cops that he, 1, is currently high on meth, 2, routinely provides meth to his daughter, 3, has meth in his trailer behind him, 4, his daughter had been at the trailer with him while meth was in the trailer, 5, the meth was stored where she could easily access it, and she knew where it was, 6, he used meth with her. Just unfathomable levels of I'm struggling to believe this conversation is happening, and afraid if I say anything he'll come to his senses and shut up. How old was the daughter? That's appalling. I once worked for a project in a call center and we constantly had QA on our asses about call quality. They would review every call and send the report to you and your supervisor, who would sign off on it, then send it back to QA. If you got to reports under 90%, there'd be a warning and you'd be fired after 4. Now, this was all done via email, so I'd save all my reports just in case. My first couple weeks, I got dinged with a warning, but everything after that I maintained at least 95% or above according to the reports I was getting. One week I noticed a few agents were getting let go, agents I always thought were good. At the time, the project was looking for supervisors and these were the guys you would want. I found out they had all been hit with bad reports, which led to the firings. Then one day HR calls me and lets me know I'm fired for several reports, saying I scored insanely low scores. Just one problem: I had the reports saying those were all over 90% and I told HR I had them. The HR rep asks me to forward all of them to review and I do so. A couple hours later I get another call from HR saying I'm being reassigned to another project with better pay. Turned out the QA was fudging the reports after the supervisors signed off on select agents because they had certain agents they were friends with and wanted them to get the management positions. Even worse, everyone in management knew and didn't care. The project got shut down and the fired agents were all brought back and placed in better paying projects like I was. I was doing a mortgage for a French guy in Miami Beach that had a French realtor. Even though both were completely fluent in English, she frequently did asides in French, having no idea I spoke the language. When they settled on our property and we were riding the elevator down from the condo, she told him that, look, these guys are scumbags, and they're going to screw you over, and I have a much better person that you can work with, even though the way foreign investment works is identical throughout the state. Towards the end of the ride, I say to the guy in fluent French that we would be happy to compare our proposal with whatever her people could come up with, and it's his choice, but certainly we would like to work with him on this and any future investments. He starts laughing his ass off, and she was completely mortified. He went with us and fired her as his agent. On the spot. When I was training a friend I hired at a store I used to manage, some customers were talking shit about us in Maltese of all things. My friend was surprised to have a use for the fact that she was fluent in it, and started asking them if there was anything the matter in their language. They got super embarrassed and left. I didn't even mind losing the sale. I'm working on a job site and the architect is there one day. I've been given some light fixtures for the sconces in a leasing office lobby. The fixtures are meant to be hung from a ceiling. They can't be installed on a wall. I attempt to convey this to the architect, but he brushes me off and just tells me to follow the prints. I turn to the apprentice and say, well, you heard the man, put them up. A bit later, we hear the crashing of glass. The architect asks what was that? I said, your light fixture. As I picked up a broom and dustpan to go clean up. Edit, told the apprentice to clean it up, of course. As an electrician as well, this happens so often. Wrong drawings given to us, we bring it up but get told or don't go off spec. Sounds good, chief, I'll follow it exactly and you can tell me when the customer wants it changed. I was working as a cub reporter in a small town and had done a piece on stray dog menace in some area. Plenty of dogs had attacked kids in a short while. The dog lovers of the town took that piece as a I hate all dogs article. They shared it in their WhatsApp group and started talking trash about me. What they did not know was that the admin of the group ran a dog shelter, and a few months back, I had done a piece on the shelter, so I was in the group too. At one point, they began scheming that they'd cook up stories about me lying in the story and complain to the publication. Mind you, these are upstanding citizens, doctors, lawyers, senior executives. So their word had weight against a rookie reporter. I just showed the chat to the editor. He had a good laugh about it. Never knew what happened after that, but hours later, they stopped bitching about me. The admin of the group. I love dogs, but man, I fucking hate dog people. I worked in a countrywide company and needed something done by a peer in another office. She was very uncooperative and was arguing with me that she should not do what I was asking because it was not the correct procedure. It was, in fact, the correct procedure as per my boss, who was her boss. But before I could tell her where I had gotten my instructions, she took it upon herself to send me a very condescending email, ceasing her boss and mine. She was clearly trying to put me on the spot for being wrong. I just waited until both her boss and mine told her that I was right, and I was just sitting there thinking, why are you making this so hard on yourself, girl? Lol, that's always my gripe. Why do people want to make their jobs harder just so they can seem more important? Some folks need to reevaluate why they do things and if it's worth the stress to be a dick for a few hours every day so they can feel some self-value. As I was being fired from a job, the district manager requested we record the conversation. He thought I was gonna be very upset, so I obliged. Then when he started to tell me why I was being fired, he started with, "You are gonna be graduating college soon, and we want to make sure we get ahead of you leaving us." I very calmly asked he send me the recording right after he said that. Then later that day I called a lawyer. I now have no student loan debt. Edit. To give context, I was able to win litigation due to breach of contract. I don't feel like the internet is the right place to go into further detail. How does that work? Were you in a jurisdiction where you can't be fired without proper reason? But then the manager should have known it. I reminded my ex-wife the divorce court was the next day, and was invited to get fucked. So I went by myself. She failed to appear and pissed at the judge so that he asked what would be my desired outcome for assets and custody of the kids. He wrote down whatever I wanted and I could hear her screams when she read the orders from 3,500 kilometers away. Some say the tapestry of curses she wove upon reading the orders still hangs in space somewhere over Lake Michigan to this day. My ex-coworker was posed and he was using "I have a baby so I need certain shifts more." But that didn't matter if he randomly decided to get wasted on alcohol and white powder. He would call me in the middle of the night to cover his morning shift etc, etc. And I would cover his shift. And yet, when I needed him to cover my shift, which I would ask him days even weeks in advance, he would pull "I have a baby" card. Christmas season comes and I ask him if I can take 31st of December morning shift so I can spend New Year's evening with my boyfriend, go somewhere, celebrate etc. He got almost mad because I asked. His words were, no, I have a baby, it's his first New Year's Eve, I have to spend it with him and wife, fine, whatever. And then night of 30th comes, I was awake at 2 AM, gaming or watching Netflix. I felt my phone vibrate and look who it is, my coworker who is wasted somewhere and needs his morning shift covered. I put my phone on do not disturb and in my drawer. I didn't answer. Next morning I had 50 missed calls from him, few from other coworker and 10ish from my boss. He didn't show up for work. He got fired that day. Work environment became so much healthier. That's why covering shifts should be thought of as a trade, IMO. As in, for every time you ask me to cover your shift, I get to choose one of my shifts and give it to you. I was an attorney. Other side sues my client alleging he missed work for FMLA protected reasons, and his termination was wrongful. I look up plaintiff in public records database, and see that he had court dates on all of the days he missed work. Instead of immediately confronting plaintiff to give him time to change his story, I depose plaintiff and have him walk me through every minute of every day he missed work. He leaves out the court part. A month after the deposition, after the time passes when the deposition can be corrected, I send plaintiff's lawyer printouts of the court records with the relevant dates highlighted, along with the paperwork to voluntarily dismiss the case and a letter stating that any further action in the case will result in a motion against him for bad faith litigation. Don't hear a peep from the lawyer, but get the dismissal order from the judge a week later. There's a thing in law enforcement legalese called a spontaneous utterance. Many people will bury their own cases with these while bitching and moaning at their arresting officer on the way to jail. Can you give an example? Our friend group had one guy I had personally cut off because he was a terrible drunk. Another friend of mine was having a cookout and decided to invite the guy I had cut off despite me saying he was going to do some stupid shit. Fast forward into 2 hours into the cookout, the friend I had cut off from my life got drunk and decided it'd be funny to sucker punch a guy with Asperger's. Everyone was telling him how big of a piece of shit thing that was to do, but he laughed and shrugged and played it off as no big deal, as the Asperger's guy was holding back tears. I didn't have to do a fucking thing. He showed everyone who he was. Everyone stopped fucking with him after that. Good riddance. Sucks for the dude who got punched, though. At least he only hurt the guy. Dude could have ruined his life with one punch. A former coworker decided to blast profanity at me for having used a company truck typically assigned to him from the night prior. His biggest problem was that I destroyed the seat with my big fat ass. I calmed down as much as I could and called my supervisor, who rushed over and sat us both at company office. With the exception of a few head nods and yes answers, I let my coworker dig himself deeper and deeper. He was a very loud and bombastic character, so it was easy. Supervisor advised him to collect his personal belongings and take a few days off to cool down. He was then fired after 3 days rest. As for the truck seat, I forgot to reset the lumbar support on the seat. Dang, what kind of fancy ass trucks you driving with adjustable lumbar support? My wife was a school teacher with 20 years under her belt. She was paired with a co-teacher for what we used to call the special ed students. Wife and co-teacher did not get along. It got to the point where wife and co-teacher and their respective bosses were sent to mandated mediation. Near the end of the mediation session, co-teacher asks the mediator, so what's the next step if this doesn't work? Turns out, the next step is the one without tenure gets let go. Did they stop behaving like an shat? I went to work on a large government installation in a remote area. A woman I had never met filed a sexual harassment complaint against me. The fictitious event took place a year before I showed up there, and I had been 1,200 miles, 1931 kilometers, away. That is awesome. What was the fallout? I remember an account manager for a big software vendor that always gave us a hard time. He would constantly nag about things he promised or terms in the contract. One day it was time for contract negotiations and our head legal attended, that also happened to be the wife of the company's owner. When we sat down and she gave him some coffee, he bluntly told her how nice it was that she as a waitress was also attending. It didn't take long for them to find us a new account manager. I just had this happen. A contractor on a project I'm working on was doing a really poor job installing equipment. I found their foreman, attempted to show him what he was doing wrong and what needed to be done to fix it. Some of it was so bad I was worried about it failing completely. He wanted nothing to do with me, then said the words that did it for me. I've been doing this for 10 years and have installed 12 of these. I don't need your help. We'll take care of it. I've been doing this for almost 19 years and making sure it's done correctly is actually my full-time job. Okay, good talk. A few days later I was on site and saw that he kept doing it his way and hadn't fixed anything, and had installed more of it poorly. I called a meeting and voiced my concerns, and a stop work order was issued until the corrections were made. His bosses realized his attitude cost them thousands and he was off the job the next day. You spez needs no interruption. I like how his second to last comment is "we're responding now," and they immediately go radio silent. I don't understand how you spez is still in control of Reddit. It's been awful decision after awful decision. When my ex decided to try to snatch our kid from his mother's care while I was at work after I filed for divorce. He was intoxicated, failed a sobriety check, and I was granted emergency custody. It was probably one of the single worst decisions that set him up to be in the position he's in now. I'm an attorney, and a number of years ago I had to argue a bitterly contested issue for a client against another attorney who was a complete jackass. He went first, and I followed for just a few minutes because I could tell he was about to go off the rails in his response. Which he did. He started throwing out every legal sounding argument, and the judge was clearly getting pissed and told him to stop a few times. Even though he was straight up lying about my client, I decided it was best if I just turned and walked away from the podium we were standing at and let him keep going. By the end, I was towards the back of the courtroom. After another minute of this nonsense, the bailiff actually had to come up and put his hand on the back of the attorney and tell him to stop. Still the only time I've ever seen that happen. I have to keep this a little vague. I'm in jury trial. It's an assault case. My client is pleading self-defense. Nobody died but somebody got whopped. I can't get a bunch of the shit I want into evidence. No